When it comes to economic war, there are many ways to fight it. You can sanction your adversary, cutting them away from your currency, and this cuts away their ability to transact and do business with the world. But there is another way to do battle, and that is by controlling the flow of commodities, things that every single country needs, resources like oil and wheat. And unlike financial sanctions, there's no way to find alternatives. If you can't use dollars, you can always find alternatives like the Chinese yuan, the Indian rupee, but you can't really substitute oil and gas and wheat. You still need to generate energy. You still need to put food on the table. And that's why the world is scrambling in panic as Russia terminates the Black Sea grain deal. Russia is no longer playing ball with the UN and the West. And because of this, wheat prices have started to surge. Russia has effectively constricted the supply of wheat from Ukraine to the world, and this is pushing prices up. Almost immediately, the price of wheat jumped by 3%, just 20 cents shy of the recent high in June. And this isn't good because the world is already facing a cost of living crisis. So if you think the Federal Reserve has successfully crushed inflation, prepare for a second wave of higher prices. It's coming real soon. And remember that this is a supply side issue. You're constricting the supply of food to the world. So the same amount of dollars chasing a smaller amount of grain simply means higher prices. No amount of rate hikes can change this reality. And could Ukraine still get their grain out to the world? Yes, but at a much higher cost. The Black Sea grain deal was all about transporting food from ports like Odessa all the way to Istanbul in Turkey. From there, it gets re-exported and distributed to the rest of the world. And since the start of the deal, over 32 million tons of corn and wheat have been shipped to the world. And the point was to cut through all the land masses to save time and cost. But now that isn't possible anymore. And according to Rabobank, this will trigger a deadly domino effect that will jack food prices up globally. Ukraine will now be forced to export most of its grain through its land borders and Danube ports. And this will drive costs up and crush profits down. But it doesn't just stop there. The knock-on effect of this is that it could prompt farmers to plant less next season, placing further pressure on supplies going forward. So we have to prepare for elevated food prices going forward. Whatever you're paying for pasta or for bread today, be ready to pay more, much more. Now, of course, the United States isn't happy about this. We have Anthony Blinken calling Russia's decision unconscionable and calling for the deal to be reinstated. He is accusing Russia of weaponizing food and is pushing the world into a food crisis. And this is why we need to dig deeper. Why did Russia back out of the deal? Because if you know the causes, you can take steps to rectify them and get the grain flowing once again. And on Russia's end, the United Nations, the UN, agreed to help Moscow overcome any obstacles to their own food and fertilizer shipments. And that means Putin wants the West to drop the sanctions and restrictions on Russian grain supplies. And the complaints keep mounting up. According to Putin, Russia only agreed to the deal for the sake of the countries in Africa and Latin America, but less than 3% of exports under the Black Sea deal actually went to them. 44% of the food went to high-income countries in places like Europe. So Russia is feeling shortchanged. And if we look at where the Black Sea grain really ended up, it is obvious it isn't really going to the intended destinations of South America and Africa. Middle-income countries like China are buying a ton of grain, around 8 million tons worth. And just look at the amount of food that's been exported to high-income countries across Europe. Spain itself has taken in almost 6 million tons of Ukrainian grain. So it is obvious which countries are benefiting over the past 12 months. But if you think Putin will reverse this decision, I don't think it will happen, guys. Russia has made it very clear that this deal will not be extended. The decision is final. Here's a statement from the Kremlin itself. When the part of the Black Sea deal related to Russia is implemented, Russia will immediately return to the implementation of the deal. So unless Russia gets their own food and fertilizers out to the world, they don't see any incentive to continuing the Black Sea grain deal. And what we are seeing is a tit-for-tat economic battle. It is a commodity war where Russia is reversing the tables to inflict higher inflation on the West. In fact, things have only gotten worse. After pulling out of the deal, the Kremlin warned that shipping grain out of Ukraine is now a dangerous affair. There are no more security guarantees from Russia and anything goes now. And obviously, Zelensky wants to get the grain out of Ukraine, but the ports are now officially part of a war zone. And I don't think any shipping companies will be crazy enough to risk it, right? If you want to risk transporting grain out, your ship could get blown up. We even have insurers pulling away coverage for ships looking to enter the Black Sea corridor to export food. And this is going to put further pressure on supply chains as traders won't want to risk it. And we've reached a new dangerous escalation point. Everything is becoming a chess piece today, doesn't matter if it's currencies or commodities. And what Russia has done is expose a clear weakness the West has, and that is how vulnerable it is to a supply chain shock. When you rely on a globalized world to outsource your manufacturing and food production, you are at the mercy of the producers. Sure, you can control global interest rates and print money, but that power is very limited. If you don't have food and energy, you are screwed. Russia and Ukraine are the bread baskets of the world. 30% of the world's wheat comes from their fields. And now that Russia has effectively choked supply away from the Black Sea, this is going to make their grain revenues rise. In 2020, long before the war, Russia topped the list of wheat exporters around the world. Amongst the top five, we have the United States, Canada, France, and Ukraine. Russia comes in at number one with an annual production of 37 million tons worth $8 billion. But remember that now Ukraine can't export their food through the Black Sea, so a huge part of their wheat exports is under Russia's indirect control. Sure, Zelensky can transport the grain on land, but that will just jack up the final selling price. And that's why the West is frightened and outraged, because now Russia not only controls a ton of oil production together with OPEC, they are actually able to influence global food prices as well. We have said this many times that this is a battle between the money printers and commodity producers. It is a war of convenience versus necessities, tangible assets, tangible goods versus imaginary wealth. And speaking of wealth, we know that investing our money is important, but the best investment is monetizing a skill or business idea that we have. And this is where you truly have unlimited upside while building the lifestyle that you want. Now, I started out as an employee first before opening my own business. Now, I enjoy earning a good income while controlling my own hours. But as a business owner, my biggest headaches are those pesky bookkeeping, accounting, and tax obligations, right? And this is where Osome comes in to save the day. They provide fast free accounting to get your tax right from the get-go. It's like hiring a financial director without the hefty price tag, allowing you to do the stuff that really matters, like satisfying customers and creating new products. Osome helps you to concentrate on running your business while staying compliant. Everything from bookkeeping to chasing invoices is at your fingertips on their easy-to-use platform. So free up your time and get your business off the ground in Singapore with Osome. Click in the link in the description below to get free incorporation of your company plus 16% off Osome services when you sign up for a package today. So it's really easy to see how important this grain deal is for the world. Pulling up a story from Reuters, UN asked Putin to extend Black Sea grain deal in return for swift access. The United Nations proposed to Putin that they will reconnect Russia's agricultural bank to the SWIFT system, and this will allow Russia to access the US dollar network and start transacting in the reserve currency again, which is exactly what Putin wants. Now, back in March, Russia gave a list of demands to the UN for their continued cooperation in the grain deal, and top of the list is getting their bank reconnected back to the SWIFT payment system. The EU doesn't want to do that until the conflict ends, and Russia is having none of it. So in a way, this grain deal is part of Putin's gambit to get the West to drop their financial sanctions, and things are becoming much clearer now. So the ball is now with the West, it's in their court. And will they give in to the demands and restore the food supply, or will they resist Putin to the end and keep the grain trapped in Ukraine? Now, while they decide, the whole world can expect food prices to rise, but how bad will it really be? Ukraine's foreign minister is saying that Russia is using hunger as an instrument to blackmail the world, while the White House is calling it irresponsible and dangerous. And to really understand the impacts, we need to investigate further. Where exactly did the grain go? Which countries are importing grain for Ukraine? In this chart, we can see where the 33 million tons of grain through the corridor has gone to. China benefits the most with 8 million tons, Spain is second with 6 million, and Turkey is third with 3.2 million tons. So these countries have to scramble to replace the missing grain supplies. Global food prices will rise to some degree because the same amount of dollars now has to compete for a smaller pool of wheat and grain, so this obviously isn't good news. But how bad is the situation for the third world countries? And let's dig a little further. According to estimates, grain from Ukraine accounts for 725,000 tons or 2% of food for the UN World Food Programme. And this is food that gets sent to countries like Ethiopia and Somalia. And we can see that countries including Yemen, Afghanistan, and Sudan all rely on the Black Sea grain to survive. Unfortunately, there will be pain for these countries. They'll be affected more than you and me. But the big question is, what will Russia do next? Will they help take care of the African countries that obviously need food? Now, the Kremlin has stepped up saying that Russia is ready to free grain supplies for the needy countries. Peskov told reporters that Russia is ready to send its own grain to Africa as a substitute for Ukrainian grain. And if that is true, then it will contain the damage. But is it possible? Can Russia really replace around 1 million tons of wheat going to the poorest countries, right? And apparently it can be done. Russia wheat production has been growing almost every year for the last decade. It has gone from 15 million tons to over 90 million in 10 years. Things get even more interesting if we look at the global wheat export data. According to the USDA, Russia is expected to export 45 million tons of wheat in 2023. And that's more wheat than the EU or the US, and way more than what Ukraine exports. It shows us how dependent the world actually is on Russia for food. Sure, it shouldn't be a problem for Putin to export more food to Africa, but make no mistake, guys, this is still a supply shock, and we should still expect food prices to rise in the months to come. So it's really transparent what is happening here. The main aim is to get the West to lift the financial sanctions and allow Russian grain to flow. Basically, Putin is telling Europe this: we can help to solve the food crisis, but it will have to be through Russian grain, and that's basically it. But it's not just food. Another weapon Russia has is their oil and gas supplies. Now, the IEA has issued an urgent warning to Europe that if Russia halts their remaining gas supply, the EU will face a winter crisis. And here's what they said: our simulations show that a cold winter, together with a full halt of Russian pipe gas supplies to the EU, could easily renew price volatility. And let me translate this. Basically, if Russia turns off the gas tap, prices will spike and Europe will face another energy crisis. Energy inflation will shoot through the roof once again. And tracking the amount of fossil fuels imported from Russia, it is very shocking to see that the second biggest importer is still the EU. Since the start of the year, the Eurozone imported 18 billion euros worth of energy, of which 7 billion came from gas. And that's more than India and just under China. In fact, until February 2024, Europe will still be paying billions of euros to Russia for gas imports. Sure, the imports have decreased by more than 50%, but they still can't cut themselves away completely from Russian gas. There's still a big vulnerability here, and it won't be a surprise if Putin really shuts off the supply this winter. Commodities can be weaponized, and there aren't any limits left. It's a no-holds-barred fight. Now, back in 2022, we saw Russia taking a rather passive approach on the economic war. While the West slapped tons of sanctions on them, Putin really didn't do much. They were on the defensive. But things are changing, and Russia is starting to strike back. Picking up a story from Bloomberg, Russia derails the known Carlsberg exits by seizing their assets. Putin is moving to confiscate the assets of Western companies that are looking to exit the country. And this is a significant seizure. The Non's operations in Russia amounted to 5% of their revenues. Russia and Ukraine also accounted for 13% of Carlsberg's total sales. And these companies are effectively screwed. They will have to take a financial impairment hit, and their stock prices will get hammered. Now, I think things have really taken a turn for the worse. Russia knows that they probably won't get back their frozen reserves, and all the dollar sanctions won't be lifted anytime soon. Even after the war, chances are they probably won't end as well. So Russia is going to take what they can in the meantime. But what about China, right? Isn't Russia also screwing China by exiting the Black Sea grain deal? Now, we know that China was the biggest buyer of Ukrainian grain. Both America and Ukraine are hoping for Beijing to persuade Russia to return to the Black Sea deal. And it kind of makes sense, right? Putin definitely won't listen to Biden, but he might just listen to President Xi. And a ton of analysts have said that China won't let Russia terminate the deal. Yet Putin went on ahead. So what is really going on here? Well, it's because that China has a diversified supply of wheat. The majority comes from Australia and Canada. So cutting away the Ukrainian supply won't really hurt China's food security. Now, will China be paying higher prices? Obviously, they will, right? When you reduce supply, prices go up. But if we look closely, so far only 0.5% of their wheat comes from Russia, which means they can ramp up imports from Putin if they really want to. So it isn't crucial for China to push Russia to get back on the deal. It doesn't really cripple their food security. And for the rest of us, I think we need to prepare for another wave of inflation. If this deal isn't renewed, then supply side inflation will start to take off. And you want to stock up now, guys. If there's any time to stock up, it is now. If there's a time to be a prepper, I think now's the time because this economic war is getting from bad to worse. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will Russia rejoin the Black Sea grain deal, or is it game over for good? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.